Alright, I know this looks really bad and really clickbaity, but let me explain. I don't mean that they're literally the people I say they are, because, like, there's Pyra and Jin on screen at the same time. That kind of would disprove that. I mean more metaphorically because of the way Blades being awakened works. So that's what this video is going to be about, mainly focusing on those two because they've got the biggest and deepest theory about all this kind of stuff. It will require spoilers for all of Torna, but weirdly enough, not for the base game of Xenoblade 2. So if you're one of those Torna first people, you're a-okay with this, although I would recommend you at least know what kind of people Pyra and Mythra are like in the main game, because that'll actually help you understand this stuff. So, without further ado, let's talk about the Blade system, which really isn't something I've done that much yet. Now, this isn't going to turn into a huge Blade system explained video. That would be its own thing if you wanted me to do it, but we have to discuss the idea of the first awakening. That is, what's different between the first time a blade gets taken out of their core crystal to every other time in the past. Namely, the original driver is the one with the biggest influence over that blade's personality and general character. Who they are as a character is, for the most part, determined by the original driver. Now, yes, a blade between multiple drivers can sort of change in personality. We see that between the two Brigids, but that could be a more subtle thing. Think about it. If you're close friends with someone or family or whatever, you spend a lot of time around a person, then you're very likely to pick up some mannerisms or minor personality traits from them, despite, for the most part, being you. So even though her memories have been reset dozens of times, most likely, in 500 years between Hugo and Morag, Brigid is still a different character than she was in the past, because the character development in each awakening has been different, and she's been around different people. The people you're around definitely affect who you are as a person. And you're starting to get here. This is the whole psychoanalytical angle that's been famous in the older Xeno games, but hasn't really had a chance to shine in the Blade series yet. So this is kind of cool. Xenoblade 2 does a lot to bring the series back around to Xenogears at the beginning, and this is just another of those aspects. In contrast to resonating with a core crystal and pulling out a blade that's existed for generations and already has a defined base personality, then that blade as a person growing and changing as a result of being with you and experiencing things, awakening a blank core crystal that doesn't have anyone in it at all is a completely different process. Sure, the aptitude check is the same, but a core crystal that doesn't already have a blade in it is basically going to be imprinting on your mind in order to come up with a personality that would best complement you as a partner. With this idea, we can then look at blades that we know have been awakened for the first time by a given driver and sort of see where that whole thing comes from. In the main game of Xenoblade 2, we know as a fact that Wulfric's original driver was the Elder Arachno, a boss that's fought in Chapter 3. And his personality is being extremely powerful in a fight and kind of being the strong guy, but also being very kind and caring despite his looks if you get to know him. This makes a lot of sense, because it's the Elder Arachno that has awakened him. The Elder, as in, not maybe just old, but also the caretaker of a family. It could have been a parent or something, someone tasked with taking care of younger Arachnos. So, while, yeah, the thing attacked the party and you had to kill it, it was probably just acting on instinct, and Wulfric inherited that caring nature. Now, lore-wise, all the core crystals you get just random gacha blades from were dropped by other drivers who attempted to take on whatever enemy you got them from and died trying, and all of the other core crystals guaranteed to have X rare blade in them have explanations that involve them having previous drivers. Wulfric is actually the only one in the main game where we're confirmed to have seen that blade with their first driver. But we can also make some pretty educated guesses about some other ones. First off is obviously Laura and Haze. They look like identical twin sisters, have perfectly complementary personalities, never really disagree on anything, and work together very well in battle. Even though Jin was her original blade, he was an ancestral core crystal that had a storied history and was passed down, so they have the bigger connection and closer bond. Haze came from a core crystal that she awoke for its original awakening, and that's why they're really similar. It's also very likely that Pandoria was awoken for the first time by Zeke, just because their personalities are very, very similar, and they complement each other really well. They have their whole Bringer of Chaos act going, and they do that kind of thing. I don't really count Poppy, so among the main cast of the base game, that's the only one, since everyone else we know is accounted for by at least one previous driver. But as for Torna, while we know Jin, Aegeon, Brigid, and Minoth all have had previous drivers before the ones you play as, and Haze we're pretty sure was first from Laura, we also know as a fact that Addam was the first driver of Mythra. A lot of things can be said about Addam and Mythra's character dynamic, and a lot of people choose to interpret it in different ways, from there being some sort of romantic connection between the two of them, to them just kind of being vitriolic friends that like taking jabs at each other because that's the way their friendship works, to Mythra having an unrequited crush on Addam, which is actually a legitimate explanation for her treatment towards Rex at the beginning, because she can't help but compare him to someone she was in love with, which, you know, that's never a good comparison if you're not the object of the person's affections. But my favorite is father and teenage daughter. Addam is definitely not the teen dad by any stretch, but in terms of his relationship with Mythra, it does actually kind of make a lot of sense. Yeah, he probably isn't old enough to have a daughter in her teens, if she were his actual daughter, just based on the fact that he seems to be younger than Laura's 30, and even that's pushing it if you assume 13. So it doesn't make sense age-wise, but the way they act just completely comes off as a father-daughter dynamic, and Mythra's personality in Torna is very much the bitchy teen before, you know, PTSD happened. So what is it about Addam that would cause him to awaken a blade with which he has a father-daughter type relationship? That, as a fact, is actually pretty easy to figure out. In the final side quest of the Golden Country, which I unfortunately don't have footage for, because when I recorded Torna, like, the whole second half of the story got completely corrupted. I had to re-record the cutscenes, but that's why when I do Torna stuff, it's either something I just re-recorded, or it's like the same 2 hours of exploring Gormott. But we find out that he has a pregnant wife, who presumably escapes with him to Leftheria when all the stuff goes down. We also know, though, that he's been traveling with Milton and Mythra after Mythra's being awakened for about a year, although he's been just on his normal pre-driver escapades with Milton for even longer than that. So, while yeah, he knows that he's going to have a child, and that might be him getting into the parenting mood, acting towards Mythra, who's a less mature than him person under his care, that kind of thing. But why would he have the whole parental urge thing earlier? My guess would be that either he and his wife were trying and were unable to conceive or something until later, or he was too busy to do it, or he hadn't approached his wife yet but was subconsciously thinking, yeah, I might want to have kids at some point, and it was those desires for a child that led to him awakening a blade that, for all intents and purposes, was his daughter. Granted, that still makes it hard to explain the fact that his wife got pregnant after he'd already been out doing the whole fighting the Valos evil-y thing. I don't know when that happened. I guess it could be that one time in the story when you're staying at Aletta Villa, and then the end of the side quest where you find out that she's pregnant just kind of takes place later in real time than it looks based on game time. I don't know, but we covered the Mythra stuff to the best of my abilities. So now, let's talk about why Pyra is Jin. First off, though, you might be wondering what this has to do with First Awakenings, because, well, Pyra wasn't awakened, she was created by Mythra. But keep in mind the way she came to be. It was as a result of Mythra, with a higher level of power than normal, breaking down and having a huge emotional episode that caused her to retreat into the recesses of her mind, forming somehow another personality to take over and, I guess, pilot the body around while she recovered, or that kind of thing, or just didn't want to interact with the world directly. That seems at least superficially similar to a Blade Awakening, especially because Pyra and Mythra are technically different beings. While they have the same body and share the same injuries, hair color and length and clothes do change between the two of them, and Mythra can't directly control Pyra's body, and Pyra can't directly control Mythra's. They just are able to switch and sometimes take control over each other by physically morphing body. So to me, that seems like Mythra subconsciously created a blade using her own core crystal, basically. And while that seems a little wonky, Aegises do seem to, by default, have the ability to become drivers if Malos and Sever are any indication, so that's at least reasonably possible, I guess. But the idea that Pyra is Jinn comes about as a result of Mythra's large array of inadequacies about herself. I know the joke about Torna being one gigantic roast of Mythra has been beaten into the ground by now, but it is a lot of legitimate character stuff that feeds into how she is in the main game later on. That can also be its own video, I suppose. But it's important to see that she's given examples of how you should behave, not just told that what she's doing is wrong. And probably the best example she gets, at least from a bleed, is Jinn. Laura is without a doubt the team mom, being the oldest human member and kind of the one having to take care of the two dumb guys who get into their shenanigans and stuff. But in terms of blades, Jinn is probably also the most mature one out of the group. Aegeon doesn't really do much, so you can't really tell. Bridget is less mature than the Morag version because she gets into arguments with Mythra. Hayes is a little too cinnamon rolly, I guess, to be the one taking charge. And Minoth joins relatively late and doesn't seem to be the most responsible type. So Jinn is probably the best role model out of all of them. Also, he's well liked by everyone. He's calm, he's kind, he's a great cook, and he's someone that people just genuinely like and depend on. And wow, think about Pyra. She's kind, she's sweet, she's calm, she's a fantastic cook while Mythra is a terrible one, and she's just a much more easily likable and dependable person than Mythra is even in the base game. So, Pyra was unintentionally created by Mythra. I think we can agree on that. It wasn't an intentional personality making thing. And it was sort of similar to Awakening a Blade. So if you think about the creation of Pyra being Mythra awakening a blade with her own core crystal, she's creating Pyra as an idealized version of herself, based on people she looks up to and wishes she was more like, the chief of which being Jinn. So instead of being an arrogant, abrasive, immature brat who tends to use and abuse her power and gets people she cares about killed because she can't control it, she creates Pyra, who's weaker by definition, and fits a lot of the criteria I said Mythra wasn't. Now, this isn't a commentary on their characters at all, it's just saying that Pyra and Mythra were, by design, written to be very contrasting in that kind of thing, but that there also seems to be a very specific lore reason behind it, and I guess I think that's pretty cool. As always though, thank you very much for watching. I'm amazed this of all things turned out to be such a short video, but hey, I guess either I'm better at explaining than I thought, or things just required less explanation this time. People have been requesting on the 10K survey that I try to keep videos a bit shorter than I had been, because it was for various reasons. Either they get too long, they get too convoluted, I speak too slowly, draw stuff out too much, or tangent and stuff, and yeah, I have been trying to fix that for a while now. This wasn't an intentional part of that effort, but I do want to try keeping videos under 20 minutes more frequently than I had before. But if you're worried, don't. If the topic is necessary, those big 30 to 45 minute epics are still going to be happening, and I'm still going to love making those too just as much. Besides that though, if you're worried that I've been making a lot of non-Xenoblade videos recently, don't. I have exactly one that isn't a So I Did the Thing video planned, and that's one of the things I talked about on the survey, where it's just kind of an explanation, behind the scenes type thing, and backstory of this channel. Beyond that, the only main non-Xenoblade series, until I get into the Golden Sun stuff, is going to be So I Did the Thing, which is going to come back with a Kingdom Hearts thing, and then probably more stuff about other things I've did, because I wanted to make that an actual series. With that though, I keep forgetting to say like, comment, and subscribe in these outros, so like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.